Hey, and welcome back to the Relationship School's Smart Couple podcast. I'm Jason Gaddis, your host, and I'm grateful to be here. We are exploring a series for men by men on what makes men, so challenging in partnership sometimes. And with all that's going on in the world, I thought it was beneficial to have this conversation. All right, this podcast is for people that want great long-term partnerships and also want great relationships, deep ones, fulfilling ones, connected ones that can weather the storm of adversity. So we interview experts, therapists, neuroscientists, my wife, myself, and lots of cool people. And we jam about partnership and relationship. So in this series, we are discussing men. And I'm going to have a smattering of guests about men over the coming weeks and months. And we'll keep referring back to this initial series and male conditioning. In this episode, I've got Coach Michael Taylor, who is an old friend and somewhat of an old/new friend. We met years ago when I hosted the Evolving Men's Conference. He came out to help us with this conversation around masculinity. And he's just a great guy and extremely positive, and despite what he's been through, and man, he helps a lot of people, and he's got a great message. So I thought it'd be cool to have him on the show and get his take on men, especially men in partnership. So here's a little bit about Michael. He's a motivational speaker, entrepreneur, author, and radio show host. He's born in the inner city projects of Corpus Christi, Texas, to a single mother of 6 kids. He learned to overcome adversity pretty quickly and became a mid-level manager of a multi-million-dollar company at age 21. Got married at 23, super psyched, and he'll tell that story, and then got a divorce, and he'll tell that story. And he's just an outstanding coach, teacher, and just a great guy to be around in terms of, you want to pick me up, hang out with this guy. So he's written 7 books. His newest book's called The New Face of Entrepreneurship. And he's written a lot of other books for Black men in general. And I think you're going to like this guy. He's at CoachMichaelTaylor.com. So more about him at the end. And let's dive right in and hear a little bit about Michael and his story. And then there's just a couple of nice nuggets in here around how he turned his shit around. And what was cool was his story about how his wife, his first wife, was sort of what she was wanting from him. And it wasn't what he thought. So I think you're going to like this. Okay, stay tuned to the end till your action step, and let's get into it. All right, welcome to the show, Michael Taylor.
All right, man. I am so excited to be here, Jason.
Yeah, I'm stoked to have you. It's awesome seeing you again. It's been years, so great to have you on the show.
Well, again, you and I are kindred spirits and brothers in a lot of different ways. So again, it's my honor and privilege to share this time with you.
Cool. Thanks, man. Michael, will you just introduce yourself just a little bit about, I just read your bio there, but just give us a sense of who you are and what you're up to in the world.
Well, first of all, I am an irrepressible optimist with a passion for the impossible. I don't buy into all the negative mainstream media. I'm excited. I think there's never been a better time to be alive on the planet than right now. I am an entrepreneur, author, motivational speaker, radio and TV show host who is committed to empowering people to transform their lives from the inside out. Been happily married for the past 17 years, have 3 amazing children who I love, and just really enjoying life right now.
Nice. So cool. 17 years, dude. Nice work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome. 3 kids too. You weathered that storm. How old were you when you got married?
Well, this is actually my second marriage. My first marriage, I was 21 and was definitely not prepared for marriage. Got married for all the wrong reasons. Climbing the corporate ladder, thinking I was supposed to do what society says I was supposed to do, all the wrong reasons to get married. I was divorced in 1989. I was single, consciously single for 5 years where I didn't date, just wanted to really get in touch with myself and figure out what was it about me that was keeping my relationships from working. And that took me onto a deep dive of personal growth and transformation. And when I was ready, I found the absolute perfect person for me. And she's amazing. And like I said, we've been together for 20 years and married for 17.
Yeah, killer. Wow. So was the end of your first marriage what kind of catapulted you on the personal growth journey, or was there something else?
No, that was it. You see, in 1983, I was living the American dream. I had the house, the wife, the 2.5 kids and all of that. And by society standards, I was pretty successful. And then that dream turned into a nightmare as I went through a divorce, a bankruptcy, a foreclosure, a deep state of depression. I was homeless for 2 years, living out of a car. And so the divorce was the wake-up call that I needed. You know, I've come to know that everything does happen for a reason. And if we're willing to look deeply enough, there's always a lesson and a gift in all adversities. And so my divorce really was the thing that woke me up. And it really challenged me to really stop looking outside of myself and looking inward to kind of figure out what was going on with Michael Taylor. And so as I look back in retrospect, my divorce was the best thing that ever happened to me, although it was painful and challenging, but it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because if I hadn't done that, I would probably be still in that corporate job that I really didn't like, didn't have any passion about. And as a result of that, I learned that, you know, I have a gift of writing, a gift of speaking. And so I now get to do what I'm really passionate about. So again, I think that my divorce was the best thing that really happened to me.
Oh yeah. Hell yeah. So empowering, right? To be able to see life that way, to see those big kind of quote failures or mistakes as these massive opportunities. And that's obviously the kind of guy you are.
Yeah, so I'm blessed. I feel grateful that I was able to recognize and see some of the things. And you know, it's interesting because what really put me on the path of creating great relationships, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and actually we had just completed this workshop, and I was having a pity party about relationships. And I was telling her something like, you know, you women say you want a good man, and I'm a good man, and you know, I had all these excuses for, you know, why my relationships weren't working out. And she said something that shook me to my core. She said, Michael, if one person calls you a jackass, you probably shouldn't worry about it. But if two or more do, you better get a saddle.
That's right.
She said, have you not noticed that you're the only common denominator in all of your relationships? So maybe the problem isn't the women. Maybe the problem is you. And when she said that, for the first time, something clicked. And I realized for the first time that I needed to start looking at myself and stop pointing fingers and placing blame on the women in my life. And it really transformed me, that one simple statement.
I didn't know we had such similarities in our story. That's so cool. And I had a mentor actually years ago when I was working with troubled adolescent boys out in the wilderness say the same jackass comment to me, to a kid that was being a pain in the ass, really, right? And the group was like scapegoating him, and he was wondering why everyone hated him. And it's like, dude, you go buy yourself a saddle. So anyway, awesome story, metaphor there. I think we can all learn from that. If we rewind your story a little more into your marriage, your first marriage, just for guys that are listening that might want to take some notes here, what was it that you were doing maybe wrong, or you were a little asleep that was contributing to a marriage that was headed toward divorce?
Well, to be completely honest, as a lot of the women said after my divorce, I was emotionally unavailable.
Yep.
And I had no clue as to what that meant. And so on the surface, I had my mind made up that I was the perfect guy. You know, I didn't cheat on my wife. I came home every night. I provided for my family. I did all the right things, but I had absolutely no connection. I didn't have that intimacy and that connection with my wife because I didn't have the tools, first of all, to do that. And she was clueless also when it comes to the type of work that you and I do. But for me, I was just emotionally closed off. Now, the good news is after my divorce and all the challenges that I went through, the most powerful thing that I've ever done is I did some work with a guy named John Bradshaw. And John Bradshaw facilitated what's called inner child work. And what I learned in his workshop was how my childhood was still impacting me as an adult. And the reason that I was unable to create true intimacy and connection with my wife at the time was, number one, I had a deep fear of abandonment and a deep, deep fear of intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wore this mask called Mr. Nice Guy, which I was Mr. Nice Guy, always smiling. Everything was always great. But I didn't know how to really touch my sadness, my fear, my anger. All those things were shut off.
Yeah.
And so through the process of working with John Bradshaw, I was able to get in touch with those things, get in touch with my feelings, which, the big F word. And so what I learned is in my first marriage, I didn't have any emotional connection. I was just like a robot doing what I'm supposed to do. And so when I began this work, I realized that what was missing was that true ability to open my heart to someone.
Yeah.
And I had to go through a lot of healing. And it's been a challenging process, but through that process, I learned to open my heart, trust again, and I found the perfect person to share my life with.
Super cool, man. Very inspiring. Again, I can relate, being a former emotionally unavailable man, closed heart, childhood issues, right? And courageous of you to do that work. So in your marriage, were you, sounds like you were kind of just going along and you were closed-hearted and going along kind of through the motions of trying to be a, quote, good husband, but it wasn't working? Was your wife complaining? Was she saying, hey, dude, where are you? Or were you blaming her? Or how was it? What was the dynamic?
Well, here's the dynamic. First of all, my former wife, bless her heart, I have the deepest respect for her. We're still great friends to this day.
Nice.
But what she wanted most was me. I didn't get that. I thought by buying her a nice house, giving her all the stuff, she would be happy.
Yep.
That stuff meant nothing to her. She just wanted me, and I didn't know how to give her me. I really didn't. And so a perfect example, when we bought our first house, okay, I'm 23 years old, buying our first house, and we're in the house, and I'm all excited. I got my chest stuck out because I'm so proud of myself. And she looked at me and she said, Mike, this is a nice house. She says, but I would have been just as happy staying in the apartment. Now, she meant that with every fiber of her being. She just wanted to be with me. But because of my issues, what did I hear? I heard, this woman don't understand how hard I'm working for her. And she don't appreciate how hard I'm working for her. And I can't believe she doesn't accept and accept this and be grateful. She's ungrateful because I just went off, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I was completely wrong.
Right. She just wanted you, wanted your heart, right?
Exactly. She just wanted me. And I couldn't get that back then. I can only say this in retrospect, but I did go back to her several years later and apologized. And I was doing this work and I was just healing and growing. And one of the things I wanted to do was make amends to that relationship.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, look, here's the deal. I was clueless.
Yep.
I wasn't a bad husband by any stretch of the imagination. Trust me, I wasn't a bad husband. I was just disconnected. That's the only way to explain it.
Yeah, and in all the men's work you've done, you know that some men, that's how they show their love, is through buying things, working hard, being a provider. But what some women really want is not all that stuff, right? They want the heart.
Sure. Go ahead.
I just wanted to finish it and just say they want you.
Yeah, and see, and I think that's the real struggle for men. And I wrote a book several years ago, and I identified what I call the 5 illusions of manhood, and I'll share those real quickly.
Great.
Illusion number 1 is to be a man, you must be non-emotional and disconnected. Illusion number 2 is to be a man, you must use sexual conquest as a gauge for manhood. Illusion number 3, to be a man, you must have money and material possessions. Illusion number 4, to be a man, you must have titles, positions, and power. And illusion number 5, to be a man, you must constantly compete with and try to outdo other men.
Yeah.
And so what happens is we get trapped in these illusions and we think that that's what it means to be a man. And number 1, the one that says to be a man, you're supposed to be non-emotional, disconnected, that's the one that causes the majority of pain and suffering in our lives because we've been conditioned to believe that we aren't supposed to feel.
Yeah, that's right. Conditioning. So I talked about this in a couple of podcasts ago, which is, I think that's the biggest problem men face today is the prison of their own conditioning. right, is just being so jammed up. And then men treat each other. It's atrocious to see how men treat each other, and they keep each other in the box, right? The gender box. Like, don't be a pussy. You're acting like a woman. Don't be a girl. Don't act gay. Like, all these messages men hear constantly. They're like, okay, I gotta only be a this kind of man.
Right.
Right. And then those 5 illusions appear, and now I'm like completely stuck. So I love those. That's a great distinction too, those 5 illusions. So thank you for that. So you got on the path through pain. Is that how you see a lot of men? Because you've worked with tons of men. Is that kind of the path for men? Do we need to be just in enough pain to get our shit together?
Well, see, there's only 2 things that'll cause a man to change, I believe. Number 1 is pain. Number 2 is what I call divine discontent. It is that internal feeling that we may not even have a word for. We can't really explain it, but we just know internally something's off.
Yeah.
We may have all the stuff, but there's almost like there's a hole in our souls. And so for me, it was pain. And for me, I was in so much pain that I got to a point where I didn't have a choice. It was either get help or die. I mean, it's just, fortunately for me, I didn't drink or do drugs or anything. I'm sure I would have checked out a long time ago.
Yeah.
So that was my saving grace. But yeah, I think unfortunately for a lot of men, that the only thing that will cause them to change is pain. And what you and I think, what I'm trying to do at least, is help men alleviate that pain and prevent having to go through that pain before they start their journey.
Yeah.
That's why it's so important to listen to podcasts like this, so that you can have some insights to recognize that maybe you don't have to go through all the challenges and adversities that I went through. So hopefully you can learn from my mistakes, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. In your current marriage, I'm guessing you've, experienced conflict like the rest of us do. How do you and your wife, what are some of your favorite, like 1 or 2 tips, kind of go-to things that you do to work through conflict and to get back in good connection again?
Well, but let's go back just a little bit, Jason, because the only reason I have the type of relationship that I have is because of the work I've done prior. The 5 years that I didn't date, I was celibate for 5 years. I took a deep dive into Michael Taylor to figure out who Michael Taylor was. Healed a lot of my childhood stuff. I mean, I'm talking some really deep work.
Yeah.
So once I did that work and I found the person that I was looking for, number 1, I had all the values and qualities that I was looking for in a person. I knew exactly what I was looking for. And when she showed up, I recognized those qualities. And number 1, she's the most loving, tender, caring person I've ever met. Mm-hmm. And in some ways, she and I are complete opposites. For example, she hates books. She won't read a book. She's not into personal development and personal growth. She hates workshops. Just drives her crazy. She's just not open yet to that. But the reason our relationships work, first of all, is because number 1, I don't get triggered because I've healed a lot of the stuff that causes a lot of conflict in relationships.
Yeah.
But we're able to authentically sit with each other and create space for openness and honesty. Mm-hmm. And so it is my belief that in relationships, people never have to fight. There's conflict and there's fighting. And those are 2 completely different things, in my opinion.
Okay. Yep.
Conflict is a result of being human. You're going to have differences of opinion and there's going to be conflict. But when you fight, it's really about being right. And when you can relinquish the need to be right, you're less likely to need to fight. Because think about it. Most of the times when we fight, it's usually not even the thing we're fighting about. It's usually something else that's been triggered. And then we use that as an excuse to maybe address some emotional stuff that we haven't looked at. If we will do our healing work first, if we will get and touch our own souls, get into our own hearts, and allow ourselves to be authentic with how we feel in the moment, that really minimizes the need to ever fight. Again, my wife and I have some pretty powerful conflicts. But when we have that conflict, there's never a question in my mind how much I love her. There's never a question in my mind that she loves me. And I have no worries or concerns that she's going to leave the room. And I mean that literally and figuratively. I know she's there. I know she's committed. I know I'm committed. So we have conflict, we resolve it, and we move forward.
Huge. And just give us one tip on how you resolve it. Other than I get the open and honest communication. Is there something you guys have just a technique in your own home, like something you guys do to repair that conflict?
Well, it's really about sitting down, looking eye to eye and reflecting back, the process. When she says something, I'll mirror back to her what she said to make sure that I'm paying attention. So I make sure that I'm fully present. And I ask her, I said, okay, so baby, how do you feel? She brings up that emotion, whatever feeling. And then I say, how did I contribute to that? Is there something I can do to heal that? And that's pretty much how we handle conflict. We sit down and we basically ask those questions.
Cool. Yeah, I love it. Kind of straightforward and very respectful, right? Eye to eye. Mm-hmm. Sit down like adults. Yeah, nice.
And that's much easier to do if you've done your work.
Yeah. Well, and in my world, my work never stops, but I hear you in that, like, doing the work prior to any relationship is only going to help, right? Be more mature when I feel like a little boy or a teenager or an angry, hurt man. I'm going to have tools now. I'm going to have the capacity to be with my emotions and my experience. I'm going to know if I'm blaming or not, right? Versus not doing any work. I just come in and it's just kind of a mess.
Well, it really boils down to the word awareness. Having the awareness, because I know in previous relationships, I didn't have the awareness to know how I was feeling to be able to communicate that with her.
Yeah.
See, so when you do this work and you gain the awareness, then number one, there's that what I call the gap, where instead of just reacting, you can stop and pause. And it's a split second thing, but you can stop and pause, check in with how you're feeling. Notice that you're the source of that feeling. That person is not the source of that feeling. You're the source of that feeling. And when you can identify that feeling and then express it authentically, that feeling in the moment based on what's currently happening, then you lay the foundation for healing and growth.
Yeah. 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 Big. Were at any point on your journey, did you get hip to men's groups, or was that after your 5-year journey and once you started a marriage? Did you join a men's group?
Well, I had done a lot of work, a lot of work. And I was sitting up one day and I was watching a documentary on television. And in this documentary, there were these old white guys out in the woods beating on drums and having a conversation about stuff that I really related to. Things like divorce and anger and so forth. And so I sat there and I just kind of watched this documentary for a while. I knew absolutely nothing about what they were talking about. And then at the end, it had something about MKP.
Yep.
The Mankind Project. Well, the universe is perfect. After I watched that documentary, I go to the grocery store to get some groceries. And I pull a basket out. And in the basket is a flyer for MKP. Mm-hmm. Now, I have a spiritual side, and I recognize when the universe is sending me signals. And I looked at this thing, and I went, oh, my gosh, I'm supposed to do this. And because of that documentary, because of me finding that brochure, I signed up for MKP.
Wow.
I did the Mankind Project, and it was an eye-opening experience because what I never recognized until I did MKP was how much I actually did not trust men. It was huge. Now, I had facilitated co-ed workshops and, thought that I was a pretty open guy, but I had some hidden stuff that I never really looked at. And MKP allowed me to really take a look at how I didn't know that it was okay to create true intimacy with another man.
Yeah. Huge.
I didn't know it was okay to be vulnerable and accepted by another man. And to allow a man to really get in my space and to connect with me on a really deep emotional and spiritual level. And the Mankind Project was that door opener for me that allowed me to understand how redefining masculinity, in my judgment, is the greatest challenge we have on the planet today. And so that's why I write, and most of the books I write have been about men's work.
Yeah, which is precisely why I'm talking to you and why I wanted to have you on this episode, because you have that experience and you've done the work, you know?
Yeah.
So you said it was like a bunch of white dudes in the forest kind of thing, banging drums, which is kind of one of the stereotypes of men's work, is like, that's what men do, right? And being a person of color, was there any part of you that was like, that's not safe? A bunch of white guys, I'm not going to open up in that situation, because I imagine with the white-centeredness of this society and our world, and even how white the personal growth industry can be, coaching, therapy, et cetera, for you as a black man, was there a barrier that you had to work through? Was that not an issue for you?
It wasn't an issue at all with MKP, but I will say this. When I went through all those challenges I mentioned earlier, the divorce and all of that, my saving grace was I gained the courage to go to therapy. And that was the beginning of my whole process, my whole journey. And I remember when I was trying to figure out how to find a therapist. And I was going through the phone book, looking at names.
Back when they had phone books.
Yeah, back in the phone. That tells you how long ago it was, right? So I'm going through the phone book. But the question that came up for me was, does my therapist have to be black?
Mm-hmm.
Will a white person be able to understand me? This was a conversation that I had.
Sure.
Well, fortunately for me, race has never been an issue. I was just not brought up that way. I've been exposed to people of all races all my life. The very first woman I ever loved happened to be white. So was never an issue for me. But it is a challenge because as a man who happens to be black, there's this struggle where a lot of the issues that we're talking about right now, we don't necessarily talk about in the black community. I think for the most part, collectively, black people have relied so much on religion that they aren't as open to talking about psychological, emotional issues. Mm-hmm. And I think that's changing a lot. But for now, I think there's still a hesitancy. Yeah. As a matter of fact, in my very first book, I wrote a chapter called the "That's What White People Do" mentality. And I challenged people of color to look at themselves and ask themselves if they're holding on to the belief that there are certain things that only white people do. And I had a whole list of things that I've heard all my life that, black people have told me that I'm trying to be white because I've done some of those things. So for me, again, I feel truly blessed and grateful that I didn't have that barrier about race. When I did MKP, I was the only man of color there the whole weekend. There were no facilitators, no other. I was the only man of color there. As a matter of fact, in the last 25 years that I've been doing all this work, I'd say 90% of the time, I'm the only man of color there.
Right.
So it's just never been an issue because for me, my gift is I've always trusted my own heart. Mm. I've never allowed externals to dictate what I do or do not do. And so I've learned to trust my own soul. And all I wanted to do was heal. I could care less what color you were. If you were going to support me in healing, hey, I was open.
Wow, that's powerful, man. So cool. And so if a man who happens to be black is listening to this and has some reservations about going to see a coach, a white therapist, a person of maybe a different color, like what do you say to them? How do you encourage them?
Well, first of all, I think it's important for men of color to have containers in which other men of color are present. Yeah. Especially if you're just getting started in this kind of work. And that's why I actually have a whole community called Shattering Black Male Stereotypes, in which I deal specifically with men of color. And I have black therapists come on and we're talking about these same types of issues. I have black coaches that come on. And so I think men of color are more open now, but there's still, unfortunately, a lot of distrust from some men of color for people that aren't black. But I encourage all men to recognize, regardless of what color you are, healing transcends race.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're willing to open your heart and trust, the ethnicity of the person isn't really important. What's important is if that person can hold space and see you for who you are.
Yeah.
And so that's, I think, part of the challenge, because there are some people, as well-intentioned as they are, may not have really checked their biases.
Yep.
And that can come across when you're trying to coach someone that's not the same ethnicity as you. That makes sense?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, totally. Yep. Your own biases, your own unconscious racism, your own whatever is going on under there, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so let me say this. I personally, this is just my perception, I don't think race relations are actually getting worse in this country. I really don't. I think we live in a culture that promotes this ethnocentric worldview, which basically says, if you're of a different ethnicity, then you're different and separate from us. And that's promoted and has been promoted forever. But there's also the human-centric worldview, from my perspective, which basically says, as human beings, we're all the same and we're all intimately connected, whether we realize it or not. And so what I see is a breaking down of a antiquated belief system about race throughout the whole. And the reason that I'm so optimistic and don't buy into the media's negative perception that race relations are getting worse is because what I've noticed over the last 3 to 5 years, there's an amazing amount of conversations that white people are having about white privilege, which you didn't hear much of that 10 years ago.
Right.
And so when you have, some of these celebrities, like I think Dr. Phil did an amazing job of sharing a commentary on white privilege. And it was powerful. It wasn't shaming. It wasn't blaming. It was just a matter of acknowledging that, we need to kind of really take a look at that. And so I think what's happening, because I am an optimist and because I do believe in human evolution, I believe humanity is actually waking up. Mm-hmm. And we're coming to the understanding that we as a species are still evolving. We're obviously not evolving physically, we're evolving in consciousness. Consciousness and understanding is where we're evolving to. So when I go back to the 60s, okay, I'm a 60s kid. And I remember segregated rooms and segregated schools and all of that. I have very clear memories of that. And now when I look at, the young people today who are no longer separated the way we were, and they have a whole different level of understanding than we did back then, because they're now exposed to people of other races. Because back in the 60s, I remember when you didn't even see black people on television. Right. I remember when you saw a black person on television, it was a huge event. I mean, people were calling each other on the phone. Sidney Poitier's on TV, or, there's a black person. So it was a big event. Well, now, and you got to think about this. This country is only, 250 years old, whatever. And in 50 years, which to me is just a blink of an eye in eternity. In 50 years, we've gone from a country that didn't allow black people to vote to choosing a man of color to be president of the United States. Yeah. And not only that, if you look throughout the media, there's nowhere that you can look that there's not black male presence. Mm-hmm. I don't care what segment of society you're talking about. There's black male presence in all segments of society. Once again, I'm an optimist. My interpretation of that, my perception of that is we're moving in the right direction. And the fact that you and I are even having this conversation confirms for me that we're moving in the right direction. Now, it may appear to be really slow because of our media. But again, if you look at it from an evolutionary context, 50 years is just that quick.
That's right. I mean, it's so fast, right?
And look how far we've come.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for your optimism, by the way, on the whole race issue. And just, it sounds like you're just that way with just about anything, which is super cool. So I just wanted to ask about that. What, if someone wants to develop that capacity like you have, being optimistic about challenges, being optimistic about the future, being optimistic about the incredible challenges we face as a culture. What do you do internally to cultivate that? How does that, maybe it's natural, but is there anything else you can give a listener about cultivating that?
Just a couple of quotes to remember. To thine own self be true, and know thyself. Because when we do the work and really get to know who we really are at its deepest level, at our deepest essence, there is no separation. There is no division. But we have to be willing to do our own work first. Because when we do our work and we start removing these illusions of separateness, because it's really about connection. That's what we really all want as human beings. Mm-hmm. Because of our society, we racialize everything. It's like black people, white people, black people, Asian people, so there's this media generated perception that we're somehow different, but we really aren't. And if we're willing to do the work and connect to our essence, because my belief, this is Michael Taylor's belief, is that we aren't human beings having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. Mm-hmm. And when we can grasp that idea that we are spirit, and that's the commonality between all human beings, is we're all spiritual beings. Ethnicity is just like a suit of clothes that we're wearing. And so when we really do our work and touch our souls and touch our hearts, what we'll find is oneness. That's all there is. Mm.
Yeah, amazing. Beautiful. Well, that's probably a good note to wind down on. Thank you, Michael Taylor. It's been, a treat. I could talk to you for a long time about all these issues, and I love the little slices. So where can we get more, give us a sense of what you're up to today, 2019, and then where can we find you?
Well, one of my passions, in addition to men's work, is entrepreneurship, because I fervently believe that the people that are going to really change the world are entrepreneurs. And I believe there's a shift happening, and there are more what I'll call conscious entrepreneurs. And conscious entrepreneurs start businesses with the intention of making the world a better place. And so we're no longer driven just by financial compensation and making money. We're driven by spiritual compensation, which means we find our purpose in life. And our purpose in life is to use our gifts and talents to make the world a better place. And we find what the world needs by sharing our gifts and talents to heal that. Then we're on purpose. And I believe there's a huge amount of conscious entrepreneurs who are doing just that. They're making the world better. So I've written a new book. It's called The New Face of Entrepreneurship, an entrepreneur's guide to joy, passion, and profits in business. And it's something I'm really excited about because, once again, I believe entrepreneurs are changing the world, and I want to be a part of that.
Hell yeah. I'm so with you on that. And how many books have you written, by the way?
7.
Dude, you are on tear. So cool. Congratulations on all your book writing, and you're an inspiration to me. And okay, one last question. If I had a room full of, I always ask all my guests this, 1,000, adolescents, high school auditorium or something, and I could only share one thing with them, and you were whispering in my ear what to share, and it was about love or relationships, what would you want me to tell them?
I will tell them first and foremost to recognize that they are loved and they are loved. And it is their responsibility to remove any blocks to that love so that they can share their love with others.
Simple and beautiful. Nice. Thank you. Okay. Where do we find you?
www.coachmichaeltaylor.com.
Hell yeah. All right, Coach Michael Taylor. Dude, great to see you. So awesome. Thanks for serving it up to our community here.
No problem. The pleasure is mine. Thanks again for the opportunity, and really glad to see you, my friend. Really glad to see you.
Cool. All right. A lot of good nuggets in there from Coach Michael Taylor around race, around personal growth, around men and marriage. And I just loved what he had to say. Just the kind of person who faces incredible challenge and turns it around. He's like, hey man, I'm always going to find the silver lining. I'm always going to find a lesson in this. How can I get empowered here? This is this is it. This is what we talk about on the podcast all the time. All right. So your action step is just simple. It's get with a friend and name one thing in your life that's challenging and how you're going to turn it in, how you're committed to learning the lesson from that. All right. As Michael says, turning your adversity into an ally. All right. So what is the one challenging thing you're going through right now, and how you're going to milk it for everything it's got for a lesson? All right. So name what that is. Have an intimate conversation with someone. All right. Let's take a lesson here from Michael and how he lives his life. Very cool. Okay, go check out his stuff, coachmichaeltaylor.com. I just ordered his book on Amazon. Empowering, The New Face of Entrepreneurship. Yeah. So psyched to get that and to check it out. All right. Again, if you're a man and you want help, go to, you missed our live webinar, likely. That was at relationshipschool.com/webinar. If that's the case, then go to jasongaddis.com/men, MEN, JAYSONGADDIS/men. All right. If you want to get some more free info. Okay. Thanks again. And look forward to hearing more with you soon. Lots more good stuff coming up. Hey, thanks so much for listening. Relationship School fans and Smart Couple listeners, please subscribe to this YouTube channel, all right? Do us a favor, subscribe, share one of these videos with a friend, all right? We want to help the planet get their act together around relationships, and you are one of them, so thank you.